Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your popper commentators, Michael Pechik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Not so good, Mike.
Not so good. What's wrong?
I'm not doing good, Mike. I'm doing all right.
All right. Let's move into the upkeep and we'll take care of the stuff we got us so we can get to the stuff that you actually want to hear. First off, this podcast, as every week, is brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a web store that provides you with all sorts of wonderful dice bags, playmats, art prints, and tokens featuring art from the history of Magic and the history of the world at large. They've got all sorts of products that are shifting through new pretty much on a weekly basis, so always worth checking them out to see if they're selling new. They work with magic artists to make sure that they get exclusive prints of stuff. It's a neat thing. So if you're interested in those at all, any of those types of magic accessories, head on over there and don't forget to use our affiliate code when you're checking out. So if you enter the code Commontary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of the podcast, you'll get 5% off your order, and we get a little bit of a kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here and also getting a little bit of money off, making your play space look nicer. Once again, that code is Commontary, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast, all caps. What do you got for us, Adrian?
Tired of spending your money on tangible things? Well, now just for $1 a month, you too can be a patron of Color Commentary. You'll have access to our pre and post show, as well as access to our patron exclusive Discord, and maybe even a little content.
Yeah.
In advance.
I mean,
you'll still get it no matter what.
To be fair, in a way, they're spending it on something tangible. We are tangible people.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not real. The other thing that I'd like to discuss is that on Saturday the 11th, so about 6 days from day of you listening to this on your preferred platform of choice, we intend to have the third episode of Common Area, the exciting climactic battle between Izzet Delver and Boros Monarch in episode 3.
Yeah. I'm super excited for that, and hopefully we will have nice little overlays and stuff ready to go. No promises, but...
Well, no promises. Now you've said it on air, Mike. Now it is a promise.
Yeah.
Now it's something you have to do.
Yeah. This is really just me giving myself a reason to actually get this stuff done.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll run you out of town if it's not ready, Mike.
All right. So, we've taken care of upkeep. And the first thing we want to tackle before we get into our main discussion topic for the day... Adrian, there's a new event coming to Mitgo. Do you wanna kind of tell us about this?
Yeah, sure. The Mitgo MTGO Magic the Gathering Online Pupper Gauntlet. It runs from August 8th through 15th. So by the time you are listening to this, it is going to be just a few days till it starts. The entry is 10 ticks or 100 play points. So that's $10. And the payout is 3-0 gets 150 play points, 2-1 gets 100 play points, 1-2 gets 40 play points, and 0-3 gets 10 play points. So it's a pretty casual league, but maybe you're someone who is looking for a new deck to try. Maybe you're someone who has never played the format before and you don't want to have to do any of the research. This is a good place to start. If you like a deck, they're pretty cheap to pick up. The most expensive one is Izzet Delver. And speaking of the deck lists, there are...
12.
Sorry, I was trying to count in my head. There are 12. There's Izzet Delver, Boros Monarch, Inside Out Combo, Elves, Mono Black Control, Burn, Stompy, J-Series Marasatron, Alchemy, Affinity, and Boggles. And I believe the way that these gauntlets work is you get assigned a deck at random. Is that correct, Mike?
That is. So this is a quick 3-round event. It's, as mentioned, it's about $10 to enter. And they give you the deck. That's the cool thing about this is you get to borrow a deck for this event and just kind of give it a test drive. And these are all like good popper decks. So
I'm sorry, I'm going to do a bit real fast where I do the wizards names for these decks. So we got blue-red Ninja Fairies. We've got white-red Bounce Soldiers. Tribe. Mono green Martians, little green men. Mono black mid-range. Red stuff Go Face. Stompy. 5-color Tron. 2-color Graveyard. Affinity. And Hexproof.
Yeah, no, you got there. You got the bit. I appreciated it.
Good.
But yeah, if you're looking to try out Pauper or even just, grind play points, if that's your cup of tea, this looks like a really cool event. And more importantly, this does indicate that Wizards is trying to kind of gauge how much people care about this format and see if it's something that they want to invest more resources in, which I think is really, really neat. The fact that they're actually going out of their way to create one of these gauntlets is a nice show of good faith for the format.
Yeah, and 2-1 nets you even, not a tall order, so go crazy.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They are quick events, so there's not a whole lot of time you're going to wind up investing in these things. So yeah, if you're interested in doing that, it's probably not a bad idea, especially, since it does send a little bit of a message to Wizards that people do care about our format. All right. So let's get into our topic for today. I recently put out a tweet on Twitter asking for stuff that people wanted to see on the show. And oh God, is that an I? I think that is that an I or an L?
I just call this person Lobmert.
All right, Lobmert, Ilobmert, whichever it is. I apologize for butchering your Twitter handle, but they ask, how about black-green persist combo, the strengths, weaknesses, and ways it can be improved. So, Adrian, do you remember one of the first times we ever hung out?
All right, I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll let Mike talk for the rest of the episode.
Well, no. I distinctly remember one of the first times we ever hung out outside of an LGS. I had this deck on me, and I played it.
I think you beat me.
I don't think I did, but I also don't remember that clearly, so...
I don't remember either.
So,
but this was a pet deck of yours for a long time. You really liked this deck. You were constantly looking to make it work. So this question must have called out to you. Help me, Mike. Answer me.
Oh,
You had
yeah.
a lot of good questions. And this was the one you picked. And I'm happy about it. I'm not trying to say I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those like weird pet decks that I have appreciated. And before we get too far into this, I'm just going to put out a fair warning here. This deck is not great for playing on Magic Online. We'll get into it, but it is an infinite combo deck that does not just win the game via its infinite combo sometimes. So,
And look, I'll say it. I'm going to say it out loud so that everyone and their mother can hear me. Is this Pauper Birthing Pod?
Actually, I don't want to come off as too much of a pretentious weirdo, but this deck actually more closely resembles a combo deck from Time Spiral Ravnica block called Project X. That used some arcane combo that I'm forgetting exactly how it worked, but it involved Safi Eric's daughter and cycling stuff infinitely into play.
I thought you were going to severely up the ante and call it Pauper Rexer. So, I don't know what you're saying.
No. Come on, please. The Pauper Rexer deck is tortured existence. We've been over this.
Of course.
All right. So this person who sent us in this question refers to this as black-green persist combo, but the other name more of our listeners might know it by is Ivy Lane combo. Mainly due to the fact that one of the integral parts of the combo aspect of this deck is a little card called Ivy Lane Denizen, which is 3 and a green for a 2/3 elf warrior. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
I realized that the elf is really just shopkeep. He's a shop.
Yeah.
He's a shopkeep. He's got the 1/1 counters to the equipment he's selling. That's goofy. I've never noticed that.
Yeah, no, he does look like he's about to be mugged by Link.
Yeah, well, and his flavor text is talking about all the stuff he's going to sell you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is part of a cycle from the Return to Ravnica block. There was one for each color where when a creature ETBs that shares a color with it, it does something. And the only other one I think that's ever seen play in my experience in Pauper is the blue one, which used to be part of an alternate win con for Flicker decks.
Come on, Mike. You know the red one.
Do I?
Foundry Lane.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Foundry Street Denizen is also part of this cycle. That's true. Oh, man. Big punts today.
It's okay.
All right.
The Foundry Street's unique in that it is a one drop, and the rest are not higher. But sorry, I digress.
Yeah. So the thing about Foundry Street Denizen is, or sorry, Ivy Lane Denizen, is the fact that it combos specifically with an old mechanic out of, I believe this was just Shadowmoor, right? The persist.
Yes, I believe that is correct because the most famous cards with persist are, of course, Kitchen Finks and Murderous Redcap because they were finishers in the old Meteor Pod combo deck.
Yeah. So what persist does is it's similar to Undying, if you're familiar with that. So persist is when this creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So if your creature happens to be green and it has persist and it dies, when it comes back, it'll come back with that -1/-1 counter on it, and then Ivy Lane Denizen will see a green creature under the battlefield, and you can put a +1/+1 counter back on that creature. So it basically kind of makes it so these creatures have a really, really tough time dying. So I think the next best thing would be to discuss some of your options. So if you've got Ivy Lane Denizen, you've got a handful of choices here. There's Rendclaw Trow, which is 2 and a hybrid black-green for a 2/2 with Wither and Persist. There is Safehold Elite, which is 1 and a hybrid green-white for a 2/2 with Persist.
And I want to point out that this is probably one of the better options. This also been soft played Donkey sometime previously. Still, maybe. Just because it's a recursive threat.
Yeah, it's seen play in other places. It is probably one of the better ones just in terms of it is reasonable on curve. And then we kind of delve into some of the more obscure ones. We've got like Airy Oofs, which is 4 and a green for a 3/3 with persist, and you can sacrifice it to have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature with flying. So I guess if you go for this 5-mana one, you can just mow down any flying threat, and that's kind of neat.
How relevant is it that the creature be able to sacrifice to itself?
I would say that that's not completely irrelevant. I think the big issue with Ariufs in particular is the fact that it is a 5-mana creature, and you're looking to kind of combo off as quickly as possible in this deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big thing holding this back. Then we also have stuff like Grazing Kelpie, which is 3 and a hybrid blue-green for a 2/3 with persist, and you can pay a hybrid blue-green, sacrifice it, put target card in a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. Not great by any stretch of the imagination. There's also Trapjaw Kelpie, which is a 6 mana, so 4 and a hybrid blue-green, 3/3 with flash and persist. And then there's also Scuzzback Marauders, which is a 5/2 for 5 and a hybrid red-green with trample and persist. So looking at this, those first 3, the Trow, the Safehold Elite, and the Ariufs are kind of the only 3 I'd really consider. Is there any sort of argument for the latter 3? One.
I actually am not super sold on the last 3. I think they're unplayable. Our goal here is to infinitely combo, and paying mana for the ability kind of sucks.
Yeah, I can see that argument. It's interesting in the fact that we'll get into some of the combo outlets for this in a bit, and I think that there's one that makes Grazing Kelpie a little bit better, but I think Trapjaw and Scuzzback are just, they might as well be vanilla creatures, and they're also at 6 and 5 mana respectively, so not really a great time. So in terms of sack outlets, I've picked out a handful here that I think are interesting. So we've kind of got the first class of them, which is stuff like Bloodthrone Vampire, which is 1 and a black for 1/1. You can sacrifice a creature, gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Nantuko Husk, Vampire Aristocrat, and Phyrexian Ghoul, which are functionally identical cards that are 2 and a black for 2/2s that have the same ability. Sacrifice a creature, gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Then there's kind of the smaller, leaner legacy playable version, Carrion Feeder, which is a black mana for a 1/1. It can't block, and you can sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it. Are any of these leaping out at you? Are you in the camp of Carrion Feeder is just the best, or is there an argument to be made for these other two?
I think Carrion Feeder is the best just because it costs the least.
And does the fact that the boost is permanent weigh in on that at all? Because I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I think that that's better than trying to win all in one turn, especially when we get to some of our payoffs down here later.
Then it also just, like, it lets it be, like, a grindy deck if it needs to be. Like, if you can't assemble the combo, there's always the option of just putting things into a big Carrion Feeder and beating in with a 5/5.
Yeah.
Like, it's not elegant, but it will get the job done if need be. So some of the other payoffs I've got here are kind of more sort of different end results. So I've got Plagued Rusalka here, which is a black mana for a 1/1. You can pay a black, sack a creature, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. I kind of had this in here as an option for something in the mid-game portion to kind of clear away problematic creatures, even if you don't necessarily have the combo online. How do you feel about this one?
I don't like that its ability costs mana.
Yeah, but it's not one that you're going to be trying to go infinite with. This is kind of more a stopgap measure that happens to play into the deck's game plan.
That's true, and you can use it to kill opposing delvers and such.
Yeah, like early game, worst case scenario, this thing is like a kind of expensive fume spitter. Like, you can cast this on one, and if they have something that you need to answer, you can pop it turn 2. It's not great, but it will get the job done in that situation. But finally, and one of the reasons to play this deck is Viscera Seer. So Viscera Seer is a black for a 1/1. You can sacrifice a creature to scry 1. So Adrian, what happens if I have the other parts of the loop in place and I start sacrificing a persist creature to Viscera Seer?
You get to scry?
You get to scry as many times as you like, which is the slowest of top deck tutors. So with this, you can basically scry until you hit something you like and leave that on top at instant speed. And this is the bit about this combo that I think makes it unplayable online, because I think that this interaction is actually really, really helpful to the deck. Like, being able to just kind of cycle through to get the last bit of whatever you need to win the game is really useful.
It's also a pod trick.
It is. But I'm not sure if I feel like this is exactly the pod deck. So out of these, you're a big fan of Carrion Feeder and anything else?
Seer.
Yeah, Feeder and Seer. I can get behind both of those. They're both high impact in terms of what they do, especially if the combo's already online. Like, an arbitrarily large Carrion Feeder is worst case scenario an abyss. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to fall on those. And then moving on, we have payoffs, and this is kind of the dicier part. So we do have the sack outlets, which pump themselves, which are kind of a payoff in and of themselves. But with the printing of Modern Masters 3, we got Falconwrath Noble downshifted, which is 3 and a black for a 2/2 with flying. Whenever Falconwrath Noble or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So with the combo all assembled, this is like your last piece you can slot in to make this actually end the game. And when this card was spoiled, I think I brought this up in our set review. Do you think that this gives this particular brand of combo deck more legs, or do you think that this is actually a trap?
I think that it gives you more legs. I think the life gain is relevant. It can help you win over the course of a couple of turns, or maybe just buy you some time. And I think the fact that it's a 2/2 flyer is strong as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is 4 mana, which does put it in direct competition for Ivy Lane. Like, you can't curve into this. You're going to have to, like, get all the pieces on board and kind of wait a turn and hope that your opponent does nothing, and then cast this if you want to go for that kill. And the other options I have here are unfortunately off color. So we've got Hissing Iguanar, which is 2 and a red
for a 3/1, and whenever another creature dies, you may have Hissing Iguana or deal 1 damage to target player. And then Impact Tremors, which is 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So these two are a little bit more friendly to the overall curve of the deck, but force you into red. Like, if we were a format that had access to better mana fixing, I feel like I might be able to justify this, but as it stands, can we agree that these are kind of asking a little too much of the deck?
Yeah, I don't think 3 colors is where you really want to be.
Yeah, especially since you're trying to kind of play this very linear game plan that's going to hit a combo as soon as possible. Those two are kind of bummer payoffs, even though they would fit into the curve better if you had perfect mana. All right, so we've got this basic outline. We've got Ivy Lane as sort of the core center of the deck, paired with persist creatures, some kind of sacrifice outlet that you want to reuse over and over again, and then the option of having some sort of secondary payoff that causes the game to end on the spot. I also have here some support sort of cards, starting with Wirewood Herald, which I actually really like in this deck. So it's 1 and a green for a 1/1 elf. When it dies, you may search your library for an elf card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this tutors both the Ivy Lane Denizen and Safehold Elite, as well as chumping early for as a way to kind of keep yourself alive. How do you feel about this one?
I think that fits pretty well into the deck's game plan.
And do you think it's a step too far to consider running Ending of Eye Blights, the 3 mana removal spell that destroys a non-elf, but it happens to be tribal?
Yes.
I
don't think that's very good.
All right. I'm just checking to see where kind of the jank gets cut off. I also have Unearth here, a black mana for a sorcery. Return a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Also has cycling for 2 generic mana, just as a way to kind of provide some redundancy for this combo. There's Commune with the Gods, which is 1 and a green for a sorcery. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or enchantment card from among them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. It gets a bunch of stuff. It lets you dig for specific pieces really quickly. And then also, I did come up with the idea that maybe this could have some amount of a Tortured Existence shell ported into it, just so that way it can kind of have a grindy game plan, but also this combo aspect where if it can assemble the right combination of creatures, it's just going to kill your opponent. So I guess out of these support cards, are there any of them that you think lend themselves particularly well to this game plan, or do you think that these are all just like deep jank cuts that should never be played here?
I would be curious to just see this combo in Golgari Tordex.
All right, so how many pieces of this would you actually want in Tortured Existence?
I think you'd want 1 copy of Ivy Lane Denizen, and then 1 Safehold Elite, like 1 Falcon Wrath Noble. I think you just want 1 of each creature because it's like your plan, your I win button, like Affinity Fling and Atog, or Atog Fling and Affinity.
So you're thinking that if you just make sure that you have enough dig and in the form of stuff like Commune with Gods and Tortured Existence, you think that's just kind of going to be enough that you'd see it enough of the, like, I guess my main thing is it feels like there's a potential for this to be a trap where you just kind of remove slots out of a Tortured Existence deck for combo pieces that don't always come together.
Do you not think these cards are good on their own? Like, Carrion Feeder seems fine in Tordex. Falcon Wrath Noble seems fine in Tordex. Ivy Lane Denizen is the only one that doesn't seem fine by itself.
Ivy Lane and the Persist creatures don't seem dreadfully attractive to me. Just because, I don't know, the 2 options I would ever consider for Tortured Existence from the Persist creatures list would be Safehold Elite and Renclaw Trow, and neither of those on their own present a particularly attractive creature outside of the combo to me. And I think that's kind of That's kind of the issue this deck has always had, right? Like, none of these creatures are super great on their own. And I think while having Carrion Feeder and a bunch of stuff to sack to it is like an all right backup plan, I just worry that at the end of the day, a lot of times throughout its history, this deck has always just kind of been outclassed by aggro in terms of going faster and not really having great ways to interact with targeted removal on key parts of its combo.
Then maybe that's why it goes into Tortured Existence so well, though, right?
Yeah, okay. I guess I did just, list off a bunch of things that Tortured Existence cares a lot less about than your average mid-range deck. Now, other things to consider, how would you feel about running some quantity of Vines of the Vastwood in this deck? Just as a way to both have interaction for opposing combo decks and being able to protect your own combo pieces from removal.
I would almost rather splash white and play Benevolent Bodyguard.
Okay. So
think of this deck, I guess, more like Ralligond. I guess if we're gonna go 3 colors, so maybe it is okay to go 3 colors as long as you're playing cards like Bodyguard to protect your combo.
Okay, so you're saying if we splash white, will you come along with me on a journey to the land of Abzan Tortured Existence combo?
Yes.
All right. So
I will.
So hear me out. So a Tortured Existence deck that goes fairly heavily on dredge stuff and ways to and like we've got some amount of unearths as well to supplement the Tortured Existences. If we're in white, we can run, I guess, like a one of Auramancer just to kind of pad out like a level of resiliency to be able to get back Tortured Existence if need be. And then we go like as all in as we can on the combo. Just like 4 Carrion Feeders, 4 Ivy Lanes, 4 maybe 5 Persist creatures, and like 3 Falconwrath Nobles. And then kind of fill it out with card draw and some occasional removal, probably something like Tragic Slip, just because it does already synergize with stuff the deck wants to be doing as is. I don't know. Am I just going completely off the rails here?
I think you should play that and record a video, Mike.
That sounds like I'm talking about a bad deck, Adrian. That sounds like that's what you're trying to tell me here.
Yeah, but I've never seen you this excited.
That is fair. I'm like getting deep into my element in terms of jank. So I guess what else can you think of that you'd want to run in a deck like this, even if it's just like stock removal sort of stuff? Is there what other things do you think could be added into this to make it work a little bit better?
Why you gotta put me on the spot with the hard questions, Mike?
Because that's what this show is. All sorts of hard questions.
I'm really thinking about it. I'm not just sitting here. I don't know. Like, I guess maybe you could splash blue so that you could dig for the combo better.
Okay, so if we're splashing blue, how would you feel about like, because then instead of like Commune with the Gods, I imagine the call would be, if we're splashing blue already, just run
Play Thought Scour,
or possibly like for Forbidden Alchemy, just as a way to kind of get the velocity of just seeing a lot.
And that, I just feel like it doesn't really work. The deck has to be base green, I think, to really work. Unless you want to play the blue-green Kelpie, right?
Yeah, and that's not like a huge draw to me in my mind.
Because the deck has to be base green because Lane Denizen only counts green creatures.
Yeah, and all right, here's another tack. How about chucking in instead of going with this like Tortured Existence and a bunch of these look at stuff off the top and pick one mill kind of effects like Commune with the Gods, what if we we kind of went with something like Grapple with the Past? The 1 and a green, mill 3, and then return a creature or land out of your graveyard to your hand. Because
I like that because then you can get the combo pieces easily.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Like maybe this goes deeper into like a self-mill strategy. Like we run some number of Stinkweed Imps so that because those provide a reasonable blocker early game. And then once they get into the bin, you can then sort of play this game where you're trying to use your graveyard as much as possible as a secondary resource and start getting stuff back out of it. And that kind of makes me want to play like Grapple with the Past. There's redundancy for that exact slot in the form of Corpse Churn, which doesn't get back lands, but most of the time that doesn't matter. Or, you know, potentially even something like Pulse of Marasa to kind of stabilize early game. Trying to think of other stuff that we can kind of jam in here because I have a feeling that there's something I'm forgetting. I mean, we could run like Essence Warden.
Life, Infinite Life.
Well, not even Infinite Life, just as kind of like a buffer against aggressive decks. We could borrow some of like the tech out of Golgari Aristocrats. Like, I wouldn't mind having a Mesmeric Fiend in this list, somewhere in the 75. Just something. The issue is that this deck doesn't combo quickly enough that it can't interact. But I'm trying to figure out like either ways that speed up the ability for this deck to draw into cards, because this isn't Tribe, right? There's no blue in it as we're discussing it. So it doesn't just get to run every single cantrip on Earth and skate by on that. So I'm trying to figure out either a way to see a higher velocity of cards and get the pieces that you need, or figure out a way to be disruptive early game. And I pose that to you as a question. Like, which of those, if you were tasked with building out a version of this list, would you lean into early disruption or trying to speed up your game plan?
I would lean more into trying to speed up the game plan, mostly because those effects are more powerful at the common level, specifically Commune with the Gods, Grapple with the Past. I think that's way easier to do than trying to set up Disruption, because what do you have? You're not a blue deck. You don't have Spell Stutter, Sprite, or Counterspell. There's no good hand disruption spells at common other than Duress, which is narrow. So I think that we really want to try and go fast. To that effect, do we want to play cards like Lotus Petal or Simian Spirit Guide to power out Ivy Lane Denizen quicker?
I'm not a fan of Spirit Guide, but I could see an argument for Lotus Petal. Like, I kind of want some, because most of the combo parts except for Seer and Carrion Feeder are 2 or higher. So I kind of like the idea of being able to go like, I don't know, turn 1, just toss out the catch is you don't, yeah, I guess turn 1 play like a tap land, turn 2 safe hold the lead, turn 3 Lotus Petal into Ivy Lane Denizen, and then turn 4 you just cast out some type of sack outlet to start going infinite with it. I guess my other thought would be, if we want to play some number of Wirewood Heralds, are there any other... I know you shot down Ending of Eyeblights, which is fair.
It's called Eyeblight's Ending.
Eyeblight's Ending? I don't know, dude. It's from it's from a long time ago. I'm just trying to think if we're going to have this synergy that allows us to have elves. I'm just wondering if there's any other elves that are worth considering.
Elvish Visionary.
How about Devoted Druid?
Which one's that?
Devoted Druid is 1 and a green for a 0/2. It taps to add green to your mana pool, but you can put a +1/+1 counter on it to untap it. So I'm thinking that...
I think it's a -1/-1 counter.
Sorry,
right?
-1/-1 counter, yeah. So what I'm thinking here is that you could use this to get 2 mana out of it in a turn to cast a green creature and get rid of that -1/-1 counter. Like, considering this is like a pseudo double dork.
Yeah.
There's also something like Elvish Herder, which is a 1/1 for green that you can pay a green to give a creature trample until end of turn, just to make sure that your feeder or whatever can get through. Looking. Not a deck for Entourage of Trest. We don't need Fair Sampath.
Essence Warden, for what it's worth, is an elf.
It is, and that's kind of what got me thinking about this, is if that's an elf, like, there's potentially an argument to be made for, like, a small elves package here that isn't, like, too all in on this plan, but could help out a little bit. Yeah, that's the thing. Most of these elves just care about other elves, and then we're just building like a really, really awful elves deck.
You know, wasn't Lane Denizen played as a one of an elves at some point?
I'm sure I've seen it at some point or another. Because in that deck, like, I can see a very reasonable, like, justification of that sort of effect, just because you are dumping a bunch of green creatures onto the battlefield at high velocity. And since it is an ETB trigger, right? Yeah, it's an ETB trigger, so, like, tokens trigger off of that as well.
I mean, there's definitely no room for it now that Elvish Vanguard's in the format, I don't think, but...
Yeah. I mean, we've got stuff like, is Silkweaver Elite worth looking at? 2 and a green for a 2/2 with reach. Revolt. If something died this turn, if something left the battlefield this turn, that you controlled, draw a card. Or would we, I guess at that point you would probably just want Elvish Visionary on top before that, just as like a raw 2-mana draw card guaranteed. I guess like you could make an argument for some like small black card draw package with like Night's Whisper, just so.
Yeah, we are in black, so.
Yeah, like if we're gonna do, if we're trying to like see as many cards as possible, I've got to imagine that outside of those green effects, although I guess every part of this combo is a creature. What about Commune with Nature?
Which one's that one?
So this kind of strays away from like the graveyard idea, but Commune with Nature is a green mana for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature from among them, put it into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
What does Adventurous Impulse do again?
Impulse is I believe Impulse is a land, but I could be mistaken. Adventurous Impulse is top 3, reveal a creature or land. So I guess so Commune with Nature has the upside of digging too deeper, but it can't hit lands.
I think that's okay.
You think that's okay? You'd rather see fewer cards but be able to kind of fix out mana issues if necessary?
No, I think seeing more cards is better.
Okay. All right. I would tend to agree, because I think with this you just want to see as many cards as possible. So I guess if you go in on the plan of having some amount of dredgers and some amount of these recursive graveyard effects, I think that would make the deck more solid, because it does, like, what is it? Stinkweed Imp is functionally a draw 5 if you can keep casting it and having it die. So I don't really mind that. But I guess, I don't know. This is kind of always the issue I run into with this deck, because I think about this deck every time there's sort of new graveyard recursion added into the format. And this is kind of always the thing I run up into, that there's never quite something powerful enough at any of the given slots. So you kind of wind up being this weird rickety combo deck. And you know what? I'm going to say the thing you hate. Adrian, do you know what they could downshift to make this deck really good?
Stop. What?
Blood Artist. If we...
Okay.
If there was, like...
I'll give you Blood Artist.
like the catch always is that you've got like this weird curve where you want to curve out, but there's always kind of this precarious situation where like two of your pieces will conflict with one another, where you'll get.
It's not that I don't mind discussing downshifts. It's just real pie in the sky thinking. You don't see people in other formats thinking about cards Wizards could possibly create in order to fix theirs, and I don't know. The internet's full of that discussion. I just don't think it's ultimately very helpful. Off my soapbox.
I hear what you're saying. I have seen a whole bunch of think pieces written about what if they allowed commander cards into Modern, like the ones from the commander sets. But like outside of that, I will cede that point to you. I think there is a level of whimsy in that that's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, but the cards don't exist. The cards aren't in the format. The cards don't help us, is my opinion.
That's fair. That's fair.
So all right. I'm sorry to digress. It's just that's come up recently, and I love the people who are having the discussion, but I'm just tired of the discussion.
No, that's completely fair. Oh, actually, I've got one. So there's that Rickety Zubera Storm combo, right?
Yes.
What about the effects that thing plays, like Undying Evil and all those?
Sorceress Snakeskin, whatever it's called.
Supernatural Stamina. There we go.
What are we? I do not like Undying Evil. The reason that I don't like it is because it does not work with the combo.
Well, so all it cares about is if it had a +1/+1 counter on it when it died.
Correct. I don't know. I think the persist creatures are just. Oh, I see. Because you could kill it and then it would come back and not have any counters.
Yeah. Well, so actually it'll come back with a +1/+1 counter on it awkwardly. Because if it has persist and undying, you pick which one is going to resolve first. But I was thinking of it more as like, oh, someone has targeted one of my like combo pieces with removal. How do I get around this? Also, is there an elf that regenerates other elves?
Elvish Rejuvenator? That was a joke.
That's the land one, right?
Yeah. I'm sure there is.
I could have sworn that there was some sort of effect at common.
There's Rap and Vigor.
There's Rap and Vigor, which I don't mind as like a sideboard option, although a decent chunk of this deck is immune to Electrickery. I guess if you're on the Safehold Elite plan, they can technically get you in that weird window between the Undying creature coming back and the Ivy Lane ability resolving. Let me just check and see. I could have sworn that there was some type of regenerate another elf. No, it's not. It's not a common one. Because there's a Zuri, but that's all the way up at Mythic. Like if there was some sort of like easy way to protect this combo, because I feel like that's the other half of this that's an issue, is any way that someone has to interrupt this combo is just going to give you a miserable time.
Back to some of the earlier stuff we were talking about, I do think I like Supernatural Stamina or Undying Evil more than Vines of the Vastwood.
Why is that?
I just think the effect is more powerful. Vines of the Vastwood's a more aggressive card. Sure, it has the upside of potentially disrupting your opponent, but I think that since we're in black, we should make use of that fact. Is there a potential for a mono-green Ivy Lane Denizen list? Are there any sacrifice creatures at green?
You know what? I honestly don't know.
What if Ashnod's Altar was a common?
But Adrian, it already is in Chronicles.
Shut up. All right, but for real, are there any other colorless or green sacrifice outlets that we could potentially use and just make this a mono green deck? How would we feel about that?
I'm checking right now, but like there's. Oh, okay. There's Bloodbriar, which gets arbitrarily large if you can start sacking stuff.
But it doesn't sack things itself.
It doesn't sack things itself. But now now I feel like there's a level of hope. God, it's all just stuff that sacrifices itself. It's so close. Like, if we could drop this down to 2 colors, I think there would be something there.
Yeah.
Because that would mean that we'd be able to cut a lot of the ETB tapped lands and instead rely on like a more consistent mana base, which I think would help this. Because at that point, like, I'd even be tempted to go, all right, screw it, just put in like the green depletion land, because we've just got to go as quickly as possible. But I think like there's a bunch of green creatures that can sacrifice themselves, and there's a handful of like sorceries in instance that'll let you do it. But I'm not seeing anything that lets you sacrifice another creature, which is deeply frustrating.
So we have to be in black.
We'd have to be in black or possibly red. There is Scorched Rusalka that works as a damage outlet, even though you have to pay mana into it. Yeah, like there's just nothing I'm seeing that really slots in there, because that really would be ideal if this could be trimmed down to 1 color, or even just be less reliant on black for part of its game plan. I think that would make it a much stronger deck, just because you would be able to have more consistent mana.
There are never mind. I was thinking Brindleborn. There are some green cards that sacrifice themselves, but that's not helpful.
Yeah, that's the catch. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that lets you sacrifice that specific creature, but when it comes to like a sack outlet, it's just...
Well, here we go. Elvish Sky Sweeper. Sacrifice a creature, destroy target creature with flying. Do you have to have a target for that? I'm guessing yes.
Yes. If it was worded slightly differently. Also, if I remember correctly, that ability costs 5 mana to activate.
Correct.
That might be a little bit problematic.
Well, there's also, of course, Grazing Kelpie, which we already discussed.
Well, so... There's no easy way to mill yourself out, is there? Because that's the only thing I could think of with Grazing Kelpie is, like, if there's a way to get your library to 0 and then use Grazing Kelpie to recycle in, like, some chunk of a combo that you could draw into. And even that's, like, we're getting so far into the, like, we're stretching this one real thin.
What about Metamorphosis, the real pauper birthing pod?
Adrian, why you gotta do me like this, man? I'm
trying to make this deck mono green for you.
For me, I guess I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth. This is you extending the olive branch for my love of terrible combos. Yeah, I think that's the issue. I think that this has to have either black or red in it to actually do anything. And it does, like, it is kind of pulled in 2 directions because of that. Like, you want a high density of green creatures to be able to hit stuff on Ivy Lane, but then you also want a decent amount of these black sacrifice outlets. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the issue that this deck always faces, is that its curve is a nightmare. Like, if we had access to any type of ETB untapped land, like dual lands, no matter what the cost is, I feel like this could work. But I think it's the fact that you're always going to be a turn behind on your mana almost every single game. And we don't have Birds of Paradise, because if we had Birds of Paradise, we could reduce the amount of black lands in the deck. And God, it's just always so frustrating when I look at this deck, because it always seems like it's a card or 2 away from working. And I think that's why I keep coming back to it, because I keep being like, no, it's got to work now. It's been like 4 sets. We've got to have gotten something. that makes this finally work. But it just doesn't come together. I don't know. This is my white whale, and one day I will make this thing work. But I think for the time being, this is just going to be, you know, a phantom that never quite materializes.
You're her.
As they say, split my lungs with blood and thunder. But
Is that what Ahab said?
it's a song. I'll send it to you after we're done.
Sounds like a Boston thing.
So I guess that kind of wraps this up. So getting back to the original tweet. So Alabert asked the strengths and weaknesses and ways it can be improved. So I think until we see something that helps out the mana situation for this deck, as well as sort of pieces redundancy for these pieces at better points on the curve, I think we're in a little bit of trouble with this deck. Like, the stuff just never lines up quite right. Like, Unearth doesn't get back any of your, like, key payoff parts, like Ivy Lane or Falcon Wrath.
I was thinking about that also.
Yeah, and I think the strength of it is that once you have this combo assembled, especially with, like, Viscera Seer, like, the ability that even if your opponent has hard removal, you can instant speed just go through your library and find something to get the piece back that they've removed. Something like that, I think, is really powerful. I think the issue is that you jump through all these hoops to be able to be super reactive, and what you're doing reactively isn't, you know, a capsize lock. It isn't, you know, just always having another counterspell when you need it. This is just kind of you're waiting for permission for your combo to work. I think the ways that we discussed as far as how it could be improved, I think leaning into a graveyard-based build of this would likely yield better results, just because, like, self-mill effects are far more... You see more cards on self-mill effects in general than you do at a similar mana cost for a draw effect. So if you can figure out something, whether it's Tortured Existence or just running some amount of, you know, recursion one-offs, I think that's probably the way to go. But I think, again, the weakness is always that, like, this is a deck that is really great at being reactive and really wants to be proactive. And that's not a good position for a deck to find itself in. I mean, are there any other things you can think of that are wrong with this deck? Because I think I may have.
I think we've covered it, Mike. I think there's a lot, but, you know, you try.
I know.
Blood and thunder.
It's my baby. This is my weird, horrible, misshapen baby, and I know it's ugly,
but it's your kid.
Exactly. It can be as ugly as it wants because I love it. All right. So, do you have any other closing thoughts on this, or?
Don't make fun of Mike's baby.
It's okay. You can make fun of my baby. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Color Commentary. Please feel free to tell me that I'm terrible at this game. It doesn't matter. I love this deck, and it's bad. All right. You want to take us out for the night, Adrian?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you support of our patrons, especially Malazapuku. Please consider supporting us. Like them if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or an idea for our topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pat's Games and Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course L, he does our theme song Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.